Mike Kelly, One Nation candidate for Maranoa. As the Prime Minister comes back and announces the election, there's no doubt that the LNP will take a platform that they are always more responsible managers of the economy. That's normally their big ticket item, and in the past, those Conservative governments normally have been. However, I would like to challenge that and just have a look at the last 2 years and what impact it's had on us, and ask yourself, is this appropriate decision making for the government to protect our long-term interests of our economy and the people? So, how does government make money? Now, I've simplified this. It's a little bit more difficult with things like GST, but the government has to collect money via taxes or borrowing money from say, the central banks to pay for all of their services. So we have our big business that employs people. We have a small business which is actually employs 60% of the people in the 60% of the people in the economy. That's the majority of the taxpayers. They pay their money into the government coffers, and then the government will then go and pay, they'll service the debt on the borrowings, and we'll have a look at that in a second. They'll pay all the government employees. Now keep in mind, why aren't government employees over here paying money into the system? Because government employees don't actually pay tax. Now you may dispute that at the moment, but I'll demonstrate why that is so in a little bit. So the government employees are actually an expense to the normal taxpayers. We've then got all the unemployment benefits, we have all the pensions, we have all the infrastructure programs and all of the grants programs. So just to give you an example, in grants just in this last 2022, $182 billion was given just in grants. Now that's got to be paid off by the taxpayers. So the problem is there's a lot of expenses here and not a lot of tax bases in here, not a lot of taxpayers in here to pay money into the system. So they have to borrow more money. So at the moment, as of today, which is as of the 31st of January 2022, the national debt for Australia was $1.391 trillion. So what does that mean? Transfer that back. What are the monthly repayments on that debt? The monthly repayments are $1.672 billion. These figures are taken directly off the finance.gov.au, the federal government site for the state of the economy, effectively. So that's a lot of money that we've got to come up with every month just to pay the interest, not paying anything off the principal, just the interest. So what have we done through COVID? Well, basically we pretty well shut down most of the economy, and we shut down most of the taxpayers, and we gave out very, very generous JobKeeper and JobSeeker programs. Now, although in some ways some of that was justified and we needed to have a short-term band-aid to get us through the challenge, there are many credible arguments as to why were we doubling and tripling the dole payment, as an example, when people had been living on that amount of money. There was going to be no change in the cost of their living. All it was going to do is incur extra debt on the genuine taxpayers. So what happened throughout the course of the business? We've actually lost a heap of businesses. So as we lose those people then become unemployed. So then there are more people that have got to get paid for. And then more businesses have closed, which means we now have more people. Now we have a situation where we've got to borrow more money because there's not as many taxpayers now to pay the money into the pot to pay for these guys. So we've got to borrow more money from the central banks to keep the system afloat. So then, what have we done? We have lost heaps of businesses. Guys, we have lost thousands of small businesses. Small businesses are the largest employer. So if each of those businesses have anywhere from 2 to 5 employees, all of those people end up over here on unemployment. Some may get and find a bit of work here and there in the big businesses, but the big businesses and the foreign businesses, they keep their expenses really, really tight. And a lot of the foreign businesses, they've got this nonsense going on where they'll raise, service invoices for $1 million from some offshore company that's treated as a legitimate expense to the business over here in our tax system. They're just sucking that money out for free, and then that's minimising how much tax they put back into this system. So if they do pay tax, and they'll have the very best accountants to make sure they don't pay tax, but we'll only get little sprinkles of extra money with these extra employees. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. My concern is that we are going to then get to a stage here where we're going to owe so much money to the central banks in interest with no taxpayers to pay it. Then what happens when you cannot meet your obligations to a bank? You're in foreclosure. When you're in foreclosure, the bank has the right to come in and seize either the assets or in our instance, it's going to be the future income of our country just to protect their debt while it continues to accumulate interest. So I don't think that's been a very responsible decision for them to manage the economy. But let's look at the data that they use to justify all of those decisions and put everything in. And we have to do it around the issue of COVID. I know we're all fatigued by COVID, but it's been a very good magnifying glass to show us how they do anything is how they do everything. So this was our population of Australia, 25 million people. This is the amount of people, as of the 1st of February, this is the amount of people that caught COVID, 2.1 million people. Of the people that caught COVID, so we're taking that, expanding that out here. So this is then all the COVID deaths. If you were over 70, and you know, people were definitely dying from COVID, we cannot dispute that, and it is sad for every death, clearly sad. So we're not, in no way am I trying to reduce or desensitise the impact of that. I'm just trying to use the numbers that they would have used to justify it, because there are many, many thousands of other people that have been impacted because of the decisions made. So if they're over 70, they had a 2% chance of dying. Now, if they're over 70, they're probably not taxpayers. We did definitely need to protect the most vulnerable, which is in that age group. But if you're under 60, the chance of death rate or serious injury was 0.2% chance. All of our taxpayers had a 0.2% chance of dying, which meant you had a 99.8% chance of recovery. What they've done is they've closed all of that down. What the figures have also revealed is if we go and, whether we go this figure here or this figure here, expand that out to be 100%, the Australian Bureau of Statistics have just proven, and this data was available 18 months ago. It was consistent then, the numbers are consistent now. 91% of the people who died from COVID had other pre-existing comorbidities. So things like advanced leukemia, dementia, advanced lung cancer. But if we dig in a little bit deeper to those figures, the median age of COVID deaths in Australia is 86.9 years old. The life expectancy of the average Australian is 83.5 years old. So we're not in any way making any assertions there. All we're saying is that the majority of the people that died had already lived longer than what the average Australian would normally live. What is also interesting is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics figures, they were saying that 60% of the people that died in the old people's homes, which is where the majority of our deaths were, unfortunately, but 60% of those people already were on an end-of-life plan before COVID even hit. They're in their last stages of their time anyway. But the government has used this data to create this fear campaign, to stimulate everything, to shut all the businesses down that are in this section, close these businesses down, shut our taxpayers down, increase our debt to $1.4 trillion. The other thing that the ABS come out, and I think this is quite a disturbing figure, this is from last week, they have calculated that there have only been 83 people in the whole 2-year period that have genuinely died just from COVID. Now, I'm not in any way, not sympathetic to those 83 people. But in the same period of time, we lost 100,000 people to cancer. So we need to keep it in perspective. Have they made responsible decisions managing the economy based on these figures? If they've done that to us in the last 2 years, what are they going to do to us in the next 3 years if we give them the keys to the kingdom again and they can do whatever they want and we cannot sack them? And traditionally, we know the LNP is a better money manager than the ALP. The ALP always just throws a big party and gives us the credit card bill to pay it off. We already have a massive credit card bill. We cannot afford much more debt. We need a more common sense approach. And that's why we're asking everyone, please reconsider your vote at this next election. It is the most important election of our generation. My name's Mike Kelly. I'm the Maranoa candidate for One Nation. Sorry guys, I'd forgotten to explain. I said I was going to mention why government employees don't pay tax. Now, if you ask a government employee and say, do you pay tax? They'll say absolutely, because tax is taken out of their salary each week. However, those taxes aren't paying and contributing into the system that functions for society. All it's doing is keeping that tax aside to pay back to them next year to cover their salary next year. Let me explain that. It's a little bit confusing. So, if they are paid $100,000 as their salary, their tax is going to be about $23,000, $24,000. Let's just say $20,000 as a the tax that they pay. Now that tax goes into here, effectively into the hopper. The government will pay the government expenses from. But that means that they've got to go and find $80,000 from the private sector to top it up. But this $20,000 that the government employee pays, next year, they've got to get paid $100,000 again as their salary. So really, that $20,000 isn't going into here for general expenses in the economy. That $20,000 is actually just going back into their pay packet the next year to pay them their $100,000, which means that 20 there, then we still need to go out and find $80,000 from the private sector, not the government sector, the private sector, or we need to borrow the money from the central banks, paying interest rates on that, which means that the interest rate then puts even more burden back on the private sector. This is where when the government come out and they declare, we're investing all this money. They're not investing money, they're placing a burden on us as taxpayers in the private sector to carry the weight of paying back that loan and the associated interest. So, not meaning to offend any of the government employees, they provide vital services that we all need. So we're not disputing that, but we do need to be very clear that they're not paying taxes into the system to improve the system.
This video is authorised by Mike Kelly, One Nation candidate for Maranoa, 87 Yangan Killarney Road, Yangan, Queensland 4371.